Hello everyone, and today I would like to talk about two basic qualities or approaches, if you like, to mindfulness meditation, and they're called samatha and vipassana. Those are the Pali words, and in English they're called calm abiding meditation and insight meditation. And you can think about them as two complementary ways to meditate, if you like, except that the difference between them, as I like to say, is much greater in theory than it is when we actually practice them. So when I started to meditate, I was quite confused about all the different ways to meditate, and so I didn't really know exactly what to do. And because I didn't know what I should be practicing exactly, my early attempts at meditation weren't particularly methodical or systematic, and so they weren't particularly helpful. I certainly knew that it felt good to close my eyes and go inside to really look at my heart and my mind and my body, but I wanted to know more about meditation so I could really reap more of its benefits. And so I started by looking up the word meditation in Wikipedia, that infallible and completely reliable source of information, of course. And here's what Wikipedia says about meditation. It says, meditation is a practice where an individual uses a technique such as mindfulness or focusing the mind on a particular object, thought, or activity to train attention and awareness and achieve a mentally clear and emotionally calm and stable state. I found that quite helpful. And then it went on, scholars have found meditation elusive to define as practices vary both between traditions and within them. No kidding, I thought. Just like the word sport can cover everything from badminton to mountain climbing to football and to running, I think the word meditation is often used as if it's one single thing, whereas really it isn't. There's so many different forms of meditation. There's Christian meditation, there's meditation in the Jewish tradition, shamanic meditation, Sufi meditation, and of course Buddhist meditation and Hindu meditation. There are devotional meditations that focus on worshipping and connecting with God or gods or deities, gurus or divinities. There are the ecstatic meditations, including those of the Sufis, that induce blissful states through movement and song and prayer. Then there's also very quiet contemplative meditations in which practitioners can reflect on sacred texts or words or writings or images. There's concentration meditations and mantra meditations and heart meditations. And so the more I investigated meditation, the more confused I became. Then I started to study Theravadan Buddhism, which emphasizes these two flavors of basic meditation, these two types or approaches to meditation. And the first one is called samatha, and the second one is called vipassana. And that's really what I want to talk about today, because even if you're not half as confused as I was, I think it can really help to be clear about how to practice in this tradition. And let's start with samatha meditation. Samatha is a Pali word which can be translated as calm abiding or a tranquility of the mind. And the purpose of samatha meditation is to calm and stabilize the mind. And it does this by cultivating a steady awareness of a particular object of meditation. And of course, the object of meditation doesn't need to be a physical object. And one of the most frequently used meditation objects in samatha meditation is the breath, or to be a little bit more precise, the sensations of breathing. And so to practice samatha meditation using the breath, we simply rest our awareness, our attention, on the direct experiences of breathing, often in a particular place in the body. Sometimes it's the abdomen, sometimes it can be in the nostrils, it can be the rise and fall of your chest, and so on. So we simply place our attention, our awareness on the direct experiences of breathing at a particular place in the body. And then when we notice that our attention has wandered away from the breath and that we're thinking, or that there's some other mental activity happening, we simply return our awareness to the sensations of breathing. And we do this over and over and over again, just returning our awareness to the direct experience of breathing. Most importantly, I think, when we do this practice of samatha, the quality of our awareness is very soft and gentle, so that the awareness that we're putting on the breath is non-judgmental and kind. And the non-judgmental piece is particularly important. We don't judge ourselves when our awareness wanders from the breath. So our awareness is not harsh or critical. It's always gentle and soft and non-judgmental. And just really watching that when we do judge ourselves for wandering away from the breath, that we don't judge the judgment, which is something that can be easy to do. When we practice samatha meditation, the thing that most people notice is just how many thoughts are running through their minds. When I started to practice samatha, I was astounded and rather overwhelmed by just the sheer number of thoughts in my mind and the speed with which they kind of raced through. And I think just being aware of the numbers and the speed of thoughts is an important insight, because it helps us to see how the mind works. So samatha meditation allows us to experience our minds just as they are. It's easy to judge this never-ending mind stream, I might call it, this never-ending stream of thoughts and emotions going through our minds, and to assume that thinking is somehow bad or wrong and that we should be trying to get rid of our thoughts so that we can have this calm and tranquil mind that shamatha is about. But this is not what samatha meditation is about. It's not about trying to get rid of thoughts or emotions. In fact, it's impossible to get rid of them through trying. And this is because thinking is one of the functions of the mind. It's a normal and natural function of the mind. You don't need to believe me when I say that it's impossible to get rid of thoughts by trying. I invite you to do a little experiment for yourselves and try to stop thinking for, say, a minute or so. See how you get on. But remember that even the thought, "I'm not thinking," is a thought. So the point here is that we can't intentionally stop this process of thinking. And this is not what samatha is about. Samatha is about noticing the thoughts and then returning our awareness to the primary object, such as the breath. So we can do this. We can notice the process of thinking even if we can't get rid of our thoughts. And in doing this, we can see how we relate to our thoughts. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. And when we practice samatha and just keep returning our awareness to the breath or to another primary object over and over and over again, eventually the mind will begin to settle. It's as if it kind of gets used to coming back to the breath. The breath is a relatively simple thing, kind of neutral phenomena. And as it gets used to coming back to the breath, the mind runs around in thoughts less and less. The thoughts get a little slower, if you like, a little less intense. And the mind begins to relax as it gets more used to just coming back and being aware of just one thing, such as the sensations of breathing. And this takes time, and it's a gradual process, and you might not even notice that it's happening at the beginning. But with practice of samatha meditation, the mind does calm down. It does stay on the breath for longer, and it becomes more tranquil. So this isn't about getting rid of thoughts, but it is about letting them become kind of less important and less rushed. When we keep returning our awareness to the breath, the thoughts somehow feel less sticky, less alluring, less enticing. In other words, we're relating to our thoughts differently. We're not getting caught up in them quite as much. We're not believing them. We're just letting them be in our minds without giving them a whole lot of attention, without really letting them draw our awareness. Now, this sounds simple, but it's more easily said than done, and many people experience challenges with samatha practice. And the most common one, I think, is what I might call busy mind, or monkey mind, it's sometimes known as, because the mind is very active and it can be difficult to maintain awareness of the breath or meditation object for any long period of time. And many people take this as believing that they can't meditate because their minds are so busy. But just remember that the purpose of samatha is not to get rid of thoughts. It's simply to notice them, and then the mind will naturally calm on its own. You can't make it calm. So every time you're aware that you're thinking, and just before you judge yourself for thinking, you might reflect that this is a time of mindfulness. When you realize that you're thinking, that's a moment of mindfulness. So I've heard it said that it may be that people with busy minds actually have more opportunities to practice mindfulness than people with naturally calmer and more peaceful ones. So paradoxically, and if you like, a busy mind can actually be seen as an aid to mindfulness, because it provides us with so many opportunities for awareness that the mind has wandered and starting over with awareness on the breath. Another common problem with samatha meditation is sleepiness or drowsiness. And I think this has probably happened to most, if not all, meditators at one time or another. And if you feel sleepy or drowsy in samatha meditation, there are a couple of ways of dealing with it. You can just take a full few deep breaths, sit up a bit straighter maybe. You could open your eyes if you have them closed and look around, or you could stand up or do a little bit of walking meditation. These are all skillful ways of reducing sleepiness and drowsiness and kind of raising the energy level of your meditation practice. And if you're still sleepy or drowsy, perhaps you haven't had enough sleep and maybe you should go take a nap. A third challenge of samatha meditation can be boredom. It can be boring to simply keep on coming back to the breath or another primary meditation object. And if this happens, you can try getting interested in what boredom actually feels like. What is the direct experience of feeling boredom? What does it feel? What does boredom feel like in your body? What does boredom feel like in your mind? Does it change? Is it constant? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? So what does boredom exactly feel like? And this approach to getting curious about boredom will probably relieve it because, like taking a few full deep breaths and opening your eyes if you get sleepy, getting curious about boredom actually increases the energy level of the meditation. So there are other challenges with samatha meditation that I could talk about, but in the interests of time, I'd like to move on and talk about the second approach, vipassana meditation. And when the mind is relatively calm and tranquil, in other words, when you've done some samatha meditation and there's a sense that the mind is calming, it can be easy and natural to move to the second approach, vipassana or insight meditation. If the mind is really busy, it's pretty difficult to do vipassana or insight meditation. But what is vipassana? And you can think of vipassana as a clear awareness of what is happening as it happens. It's about being aware of our direct experience in the very moment. So the practice that I suggested just a minute ago about dealing with boredom, getting curious and really looking at what boredom feels like in your body and in your mind, this is actually a vipassana practice. Because in vipassana, we notice when we're thinking and we get curious about the actual process of thinking rather than just returning our awareness to the sensations of breathing. Now, getting curious about the process of thinking or getting curious about whatever our direct experience is doesn't mean that we get caught up in it. In the case of thinking, it doesn't mean that we get caught up in the thought and allow it to proliferate into other thoughts and emotions. Getting curious means that we become aware of what's going on in the mind and body. And to practice vipassana, I find it helpful to ask myself this very simple question. What is this about an experience that I'm noticing, including any thoughts? What is this experience? And one way you can do that is to label the experience with a simple word. For example, if you notice that you're thinking, you might just say thinking, thinking. The word thinking can be a great label. Or if you want to be more precise, you can label the type of thinking that you're experiencing. Planning, for example. Planning is a very common one for me. Or remembering, or daydreaming, or judging. So you can just label the experience. And just like you can label thoughts, you can also label emotions: happiness, anger, fear, shame, awe, and so on. Or you can label the sensations in your body: itch, warmth, coolness, tightness, relaxation, and so on. And this labeling technique can be very helpful because it helps us to get more precise about our experience. And when we label it, we're less likely to get caught up in it. We're less likely to get kind of drawn into the thought or the emotion, the content, its contents. It's as if somehow the label kind of introduces a small gap between the labeler, us, the meditator, and the thing we are labeling, whatever that is. And in that gap, there's a little bit of distance, there's a degree of freedom from the getting caught up in the actual experience. Sometimes, of course, we can get caught up in thinking about what's the most appropriate label for the experience. And this is not what Vipassana is about. I've heard it said that we should put only about 5% of our awareness on the label and leave 95% of our awareness with the actual experience. So don't try to find a label. If one doesn't naturally come up, there's no reason to try to find one. So Vipassana is not about thinking or conceptualizing anything. It's really about cultivating an awareness of our direct experience, whatever that is, whether that experience is pleasant or unpleasant, whether we want more of it or less of it. We're just discerning and becoming more precise about the actual experience without getting caught up in it. We can watch as thoughts and emotions proliferate. We can watch how emotions show up in the body. And we can also see how our thoughts and emotions control so much of what we think, say, and do. And in this way, Vipassana can help us to see our experience without anything added, without any interpretations, without any narratives being attached to the experience, without any judgments, any projections. With Vipassana, we get to see experience, get to witness it just as it is, unmediated and with nothing added. We can get to see our emotional reactivity in Vipassana. We can get to see the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves about others, the stories that we tell ourselves about the world. With Vipassana, we get to see everything about ourselves directly and once again with a very soft and non-judgmental awareness. And the further along we go with Vipassana, we get to see the true nature of life itself and the true nature of the mind. With enough Vipassana practice, we get to see that our thoughts, our emotions, and our body sensations are changing all the time. They come and they go. They're impermanent. And we get to see that everything else is impermanent too. So that's one thing that we can see with Vipassana. We also get to see that life, that our experience is often unsatisfactory because life doesn't always give us what we want. And in particular, life doesn't give us the safety and security that we crave, precisely because everything is impermanent. So we get to see that there's this sense of kind of dissatisfaction at the least, and suffering at the most, because of impermanence, because there is no safe or secure ground for us in this life. And we also get to see that there is nothing solid, unchanging, or separate that we can call the self, that we can call I, me, or mine, precisely because our thoughts, emotions, and sensations are impermanent. They come and they go. So what can we actually call ourselves? There's nothing. These three insights lie at the heart of vipassana meditation. And when I use the word insights, I really mean direct experiences. So these insights aren't simply intellectual realizations. With vipassana, these are things that we know, that we experience at the very deepest levels of our knowing and our human understanding. It's as if they enter into you and become part of you in a way that is difficult to put into words. You just know that they're true, and they change you forever. These insights into impermanence, dissatisfaction or suffering, and into the lack of a solid, separate self, enduring self. And so through this process of vipassana meditation, we slowly become aware of what we really are, or are not, perhaps might be a better way of saying it. Down below who we think we are, down below our roles, our identities, our beliefs, our thoughts, we wake up to this kind of ever-changing nature of life and of ourselves. So that life isn't just a parade of ups and downs, of joys and sorrows, of desires and aversions. Life has a deeper texture than that, if we look at it deeply. And so combined with samatha meditation, vipassana is a form of mental training that enables us to experience ourselves and the world in an entirely new way, and to just accept what is, to accept ourselves and to accept life without craving or aversion. And I think that this is the spiritual journey, if you like, the spiritual journey of learning to accept everything the way it is and to embrace life and embrace ourselves just as we are. Ajahn Chah, who was a well-known monk in the Thai forest tradition, who lived in the 20th century, said this. He said, "Do everything with a mind that lets go. Don't accept praise or gain or anything else. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. And if you let go completely, you will have complete peace." So accepting life just as it is, accepting ourselves just as we are, and letting go of how we think things should be, how we think we ourselves should be. So thank you so much for your kind attention.